Hey YouTube, it's Matt with Olympus Reptiles. As we continue through our, we have the whiteboard ready? I mean, this is serious stuff, man. We continue through our species that, could they ever unseat the ball python? Now, we're going to go through mostly species we worked with, and then we're going to get into some species we really haven't worked with to kind of go through this. So this one is the Western diamondback rattlesnake. Will it ever unseat the mighty, mighty ball python? Well, this is pretty obvious answer, right? We don't have to really talk about it too much as to why it won't. But we're still gonna. It's not gonna. We'll start off right there. But when it comes to side things to breed and whatnot, is this a good choice? Well, maybe. I mean, look at it. Really, I just wanted to show this snake off. That thing's fucking bitchin' badass, man. I love this snake. That's why I'm keeping it. I, for one, do think that no venomous snake's ever going to unseat the ball python, nor should it. This is not a beginner snake, but there's a point to this video. Everybody's going to say, well, this is going to be great for beginners, or this is going to be great for beginners, or, reticulated pythons are okay for beginners. Look, there's really no reptile out there, no snake out there, as Caleb likes to say, and I've kind of stolen it from him, that's truly a beginner snake. You have to understand the needs of that species, the dangers of that species, if there are any, in what you're keeping. These guys, I think for a venomous snake, they're a pretty good starter species. And I can argue that all day long, and I will here in a minute. But obviously, they are venomous, so they are not going to beat out the ball python. Most people can't legally keep these. What I mean by most people, it's not me saying I'm special. If you live within the confines of almost any city in the United States, these are going to be against the law. If you look up your city ordinances, most of them say, no venomous reptiles. Many of them will go on to say, including rear-fanged venomous, which is why the things like the hognose kind of get a bad rap. It's because technically they're illegal in most towns, even though it's dumb. These guys, though, are not dumb to be illegal in most towns. I understand why there are rules there. Unlike a hognose, if animal control ever shows up your house or shows up at your house and sees this, even the most new and stupid animal control person ever out there, and most of them are good, smart people, but just like any profession, you might find that one guy who's really dumb. Even the dumbest one out there can tell you this isn't a venomous snake, because everybody knows what that little thing on the tail means. They all know it, okay? You were born almost knowing that sound. Like, you're not going to get away with this one. You're not going to be like, oh, well, that's not dangerous. You're going to know it's going to get you busted, so don't keep one unless you're supposed to. Now, we don't live in city limits, so we are able to keep these. That's one of the nice things. So what makes them actually viable as pets? Like, why do I like these so much for a snake to actually keep? Well, if you're going to be into hots, they're still dangerous, okay? These aren't, we're not talking about a false water cobra here, which is a hot, but it's not really going to hurt you that bad. We're not talking about even a Gila monster, which isn't a snake, but it's a hot, but it's never killed anybody. It just makes you wish you died for a while. We're talking about an animal that does have the potential to cause a fatality, and it does certainly have the potential to cause necrosis of tissue. This is something that, that can cause those problems. What do I like about them? Well, this is kind of a plus and a minus. So the anti-venom for a rattlesnake is Crofab. Okay, Crofab is the treatment. Crofab is the treatment for Western diamondbacks, Eastern diamondbacks, timber rattlesnakes, Massasaugas, prairies, cottonmouth, and copperhead, and any other species you can think of rattlesnake. What that really means is Crofab is available almost nationwide. So if you were to get bit, medical help is there, and most places have some idea how to treat this. Some. Not necessarily great, but some. They do kind of know what they're doing a little bit. I find that kind of reassuring and helpful as why it's a good snake to keep, because you're more likely able to get medical treatment. Color patterns and morphs. When we talked about the carpet pythons, one thing Caleb brought up is there's just not a lot of morphs. You are going to be hard-pressed to find a venomous snake with more morphs than a Western diamondback. I can't think of a one. I mean, there's a ton of these things out there. And I think part of that is they're native, so they're more likely to be found and things like that. But we've seen things like red that we have. This thing here has a hypermelanistic and albino, and it's at least het for caramel albino, if not both caramel albino and albino. So you have the caramel, T positive, right? You have another line of albino. You have scaleless. You have patternless. You have hypermelanistic. We have one that's hypomelanistic that I'm fairly certain will be passed on genetically. And there's a whole bunch of other genes I'm not even thinking of that are out there with Westerns.
The only one that I can think of to get a run for its money is the monocled.
Monocle does. Yeah, you're right. Monocle does.
That's
another
about
one.
it.
But the monocle, guess what doesn't treat monocle cobra bites?
Crowfab.
Crowfab. That's right. So I don't like the monocled as well for a first-time keeper. You know, not that they're not great. And you're an elapid guy. This is where we're going to be different. Caleb by nature is an elapid guy. Me by nature, I'm a viper guy. So Caleb's probably thinking a monocle's a great first venomous snake.
No,
and I'm
absolutely
thinking,
not.
I'm thinking a Western's a great first venomous snake. Now, Westerns are known to have kind of a pissy attitude. And that is true. They are quick to temper, they are quick to anger, and they are quick to nail your ass. I, for one, like that. You know, when you start somebody off on an easy venomous snake, right? Their first experience is this easy venomous snake. Everything's good. They will learn bad habits. I want to start them off on a snake that, when I think they're ready, that they have to A, respect, B, has a good strike distance, C, has a fast strike distance. I don't want people thinking, oh, I can just outrun it. I got cat-like reflexes. Man, fuck that, because you're not going to get it every day that way. You need to start off with something that you learn your skills and you learn your abilities and you learn how to use your tools in order to work with that animal to be safe. That way you respect the other ones. A lot of people like to use gaboon vipers because, like, well, there you go. They're slow moving. Yeah, they are slow moving. They're slow to bite. By slow to bite, I don't mean it's a slow strike. Most gaboon vipers don't bite that frequently. You know, when they do strike, it's fast as shit. The problem is you'll learn so many bad habits with that species that then you can make mistakes with other species. I think monocles teach a good habit, so because monocles will also light your ass up when they get a half a minute. You know, so yeah. But these having treatment available to me makes them better. Yeah. I would never recommend a snake that doesn't have treatment available locally to anybody for a first-time hop. You want something where when you go to the doctor, he might know what he's doing a little bit and has access to the medication and have health insurance. Do not keep these without health insurance. Why am I saying that? Because the expense of that crowfab. That's one bad thing about crowfab is the expense per vial versus the African polyvalence or the elapid polyvalence. This shit is way more pricey. Why? Because it's made here in America. Right? Anything made in America has to be 10 times more expensive when it's by one of our drug companies. So there you are. So no, this isn't going to unseat ball pythons. But if you're going to do hot shows, you know, and you wanted to dabble in some venomous snakes and you wanted to be able to go to a show and sell your ball pythons and your hots, I don't think there's anything bad about Westerns. They're not going to draw huge money. These are not massive money snakes, but I think they are pretty simple. I think they teach good habits, as you can see too when they're good and calm. This one hasn't moved a muscle since we've been here. I did pick it up, tail and hook. It's kind of a little small, the tail and hook, but it's doable, and it did freak out for a second. It can actually crawl out of this tub. We need about this much more on the sides to really be safe. But it's not rattling. We're working around it. We're talking around it. You know, all those things. So I think these would be a good option for you to do that. But, again, don't try to set your whole business up off of breeding Westerns. I don't think that would be a good idea. But let's show you one thing before we get off here, why this is one of my favorites. Kurt, really zoom in here and really show off the colors. I mean, there is so much of that bruise-colored purple in this snake that I just absolutely love. I mean, from its head, you get that yellow down its back, all through the diamonds. But yet, a lot of times when you get so many morphs in these guys, some of this gets muddled out. And you can see that here. You don't get good, coherent diamond patterns there. But look on the back. We've got the traditional, beautiful diamonds on the back. Look really nice all the way down there. And then because the Western's tail changes colors, even before you get to the striping portion, you get this nice creamsicle orange that turns into. It's just gorgeous. And then you get, of course, the what they call the coontail striping there with the white and purple. And man, I'm just over the moon with this snake. This thing is phenomenal. It is phenomenal. I love it. It's one of my favorite snakes I think I've ever personally bred. And so that's another reason. So Kurt, what do you think? Would you recommend these if they're going to be into venomous?
I don't know.
You don't know? Not your cup of tea? Look, I will never recommend somebody get into venomous. I'm not going to ever tell you need to get into hots. I'm not ever going to tell you it doesn't make you more of a keeper to keep him. It doesn't make you a badass to keep him. It doesn't do any of that crap that some people want to say it does. And I'm never going to tell you it's a need. But if this is where your passion lies, I do think these are good snakes to get into. I would recommend these over the other versions of rattlesnake out there. My first hot I ever had, and I still have him, is a timber rattlesnake, right? And he is one of my favorites in just a natural appearance. But I love everything I can do with the Western. For me, I like a good, bigger size rattlesnake is kind of my favorite thing. So I would highly recommend them. All right. If you got anything else, Kurt?
I have a question.
Let's hear it.
Does that snake think that if it doesn't move that it's invisible?
So there is some thought to that. I don't think that's the case right now. I think it's just pretty chill. It doesn't think we're going to hurt it. We're moving all around it. If I started poking it or touching it, it would probably want to stand up and rattle at me, or it may try to run off. And that's why we're not going to do that. If it tries to run off, then I have to sit there and toss the snake in here, and I do have a cover for this if I need, but it's just all in all much more difficult. They will a lot of times choose to just sit still and not rattle in the wild. So if you are in snake country, and even if you're looking for them, these things will be under brush a lot of times or under a rock, and you can walk right by one and it will never make a sound. When I've caught these things in the wild, plenty of times they didn't make a sound until I touched them. And then they made a sound. And then they put on a show. But yeah, it may think that its camouflage is doing its job, because as cool as that pattern is all made to break that up. So if it's in the brush, you don't see it, or if it's in the rocks, you don't see it as much. Their color, now we're getting way off. You sent me down a rabbit hole, man. But their color too, when you get into populations of these in the wild, man, this is one of the coolest things I think about them, right? Is you can go over here into this den network, and they're all going to have a certain look for the most part. And then you can go just a little ways down the road to a different den network, and they may have a little bit different look. They may not carry as much yellow or whatever. And that's going to be based on how well that camouflage works in that microenvironment that they have, because they breed in an ancestral den. So they are set up to not move, to just let that pattern do its work. If they think it is, but they are obviously very, very good at defending themselves. The rattle too is just an amazing adaptation. That's one of the reasons I love rattlesnakes, is you have a hard time finding a snake that is more evolved than a rattlesnake. We have an audible warning system. We have nice, super long fangs, and we have an adequate venom. A snake does not need to have the most potent venom on the planet. We all get wrapped up in that shit because it's cool, right? It's really cool to think about how potent an inland taipan's venom is. But the truth of the matter is, a snake needs an adequate venom. It needs an adequate venom to catch and eat its prey and to deal with predators. This thing has that. They have that in spades. They have a large amount of it. They are in so much of North America. I mean, they have such a huge footprint and range, and you can't hardly push these guys out of an area. They're just amazing at just staying and breeding and surviving. I personally, this is my favorite species of snake on the planet, hands down. There is nothing that I actually like more for a species than a western diamondback. There are species I think are cool. Iranian spider-tail vipers. God, I want one of them. They're kick-ass. They're cool. You can make an argument for their evolution too, is because they have that trap they run, right? That fake spider on the tail they run around. That's a really, really cool caudal lure. But, for me, this is it, man. These things are America. They're it. Caleb's coming back in. Caleb, if somebody was going to get into venomous, to do just a little bit of venomous to breed and sell, would this be a recommendation you'd make?
Yes.
Why?
It's native, so literally every major hospital has the treatment for it. 9 times out of 10, even without treatment, there's hospitals nowadays that it is protocol to wait to administer antivenom, because sometimes the antivenom treatment is worse than the bite.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're going to put you on some painkillers, and we're just going to ride
Take
it
the
out
ride, baby.
and treat symptoms, whether they put you on a respirator or
Should I need
deal with other things. So, of the venomous, it'd be like, I'm not going to go, hey, go get a gaboon viper, so the first time you get bit, you're going to die because the hospital doesn't have anti-venom, and it's not one of those where 9 times out of 10 you're going to be fine,
No.
And so, yeah, I think they're great. They're something that has an attitude enough that's going to keep you disciplined and learn good habits, but not so crazy that you're not going to enjoy the experience.
Have you ever seen colors more beautiful than this on a venomous snake? Other than like eyelash vipers, some of those, Skittles. I call them bitey Skittles.
No, nothing with those purples and oranges and peachy color.
It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. All right, guys, that's kind of all we have on these. Again,
I have one more question.
Ooh.
You know you're going to send me down another fucking rabbit hole, but go ahead. And then I'm going to tell you a mistake I made while filming this video. So I did make one a second ago.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What, and this is for both of you, and I think you know the answer, what is the worst
Jesus
morph
Christ.
of...
Oh, good Lord. I already don't even have to finish that sentence.
So, of them, the worst morph, I know what you think the worst morph is. So, Kurt's trying to get me to say the worst morph is scaleless. And I love the scale. We had a scaleless for a while. Unfortunately, it did pass. When we got it, it had some kinked issues already. So, we kind of knew it wasn't all the way right. And it stayed with us for probably 5 or 6 years before it just, one day we lost that thing. And, I want another one, but Kurt keeps saying no. And the reason is Kurt's like, and he's got a valid point. And I think you feel the same way. What good is a rattlesnake without a rattle? Because the scaleless, most of them can't make a rattle. Then they have this cool little blunt tail, and they still shake it, and it's just kind of funny. It's like they're trying to do it all, but they can't. They also don't really have that diamond pass. Almost more of a prairie rattlesnake pass. Almost more circular. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But I personally like the scaleless. People would always ask, what does it feel like? If it was a guy and say, hey, when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you got to do? Take a piss? You know what it feels like. I'd tell women, depending on their age, kind of the same thing. If it was a younger woman that I shouldn't have that conversation with, I'd say it's just like a smooth tube, and I'd leave it at that. So do know your audience before you say the thing feels like a dick, but they kind of do feel like a dick. I mean, it's a tube, it's kind of smooth skinned, and, and usually, you would have to go hands-on with them all the time because you're going to hook and tail that. And so there especially because you're kind of holding it like, yeah, anyway. Yeah, so Kurt says they're the worst morph, but personally I don't think there is a bad morph. Actually, you know what my least favorite morph is? Patternless. It just kind of takes away.
I think
But can it still rattle?
Yes.
I think mine's the straight albino. They're beautiful as babies.
They are.
But once they get full grown,
They're not as pretty.
they're not as pretty. They're really washed out.
Yep. You lose some of the definition in the colors.
Yeah, they're almost just like a yellow.
These do suffer from the ball python syndrome. Prettier as babies and as adults, for the most part.
Yeah.
One of my favorites as an adult, so guys, hypermelanistic.
Yeah.
And I think the hypo we have looks really, really good as an adult, and so does the reds. The reds look good as adults. But the albinos, even the caramel albinos, even our purple haze as an adult doesn't look near as good as this.
Yeah, nor does the lavender.
Which is actually bubblegum is what this is, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't look near as good. Now I'm hoping this has both albinos in it. I'll hold the color
Probably
a little bit better.
Yeah.
But anything else, Kurt?
Yeah, one more question.
Is it going to make me say dick again?
No.
Okay, what is the question?
So, I don't know if the audience knows, but why does a scaleless not produce a rattle, and how do rattlesnakes produce a rattle?
So, the rattle is simply made up of the same thing the scales, and it's made of the keratin, it's on your fingernails. Okay, that's the same material. And a scaleless snake, whether it's a scaleless ball python, a scaleless corn, scaleless berm, or a scaleless rattlesnake, lacks the ability to produce that in as much as needed. Some of them do, like rattlesnakes will have belly scales. Ball pythons typically have no scales. But they don't produce enough of that to produce true scalation across the body. And with that, they cannot produce the rattle because they can't produce that. The way the rattle is formed is a ball python. A ball python ain't born with shit like these. A rattlesnake is born with a singular button, cannot rattle. So when they first crawl out their mama, because they are born live, they do not have the ability to rattle, but they have a button on there. Every time that snake sheds, it develops a new link to that rattle. And those links are loose fitting around each other, the way they're developed. So then as the muscles shake, it causes those tails to rub together. Yeah, like this. So you can kind of see it here. Now this is not a neonate button. That has been broken before. These things do get beat up over time and get broken. If you keep them in cages with furniture and things like that, you're going to have this happen. So as you can see, it's just loosely jointed and fit together. The inside's pretty hollow. So, and then of course as the muscles shake, you get a rattle. I can't shake near as fast as a rattlesnake, but the bigger the snake, the longer the rattle. People also talk about telling ages by these. It does, if you have a perfect rattle, like all the way to the tippy point, like this snake has here, you can see its tippy point on there, and this one looks like it's same tippy point, but look how wide it is. That's how you know it's been busted. The width versus that one. If it had its full length one, it'd go to that same pencil tip. It'd be a really fine tip, right? Because these don't grow. Scales, once they're there, that's there. So they'll say you can tell how many sheds it has if you have a full rattle. That's true, but you really can't tell the age of a snake by looking at the rattle. One thing you can kind of tell is the base. So I've seen snakes with only like this many links, but it's that thick because it's an old snake and the rattle's been broken. The width kind of tells you more about how old that snake is, or at least how well it's been eating for its age, more than the length, because the length gets broken all the time. But one day, you'll have a rattle that size, buddy. Look at that. To give you an idea of how thick that rattle is versus that snake, there you go. So, I mean, its whole tail is not even that thick. It's pretty awesome. I did tell you I would share with you a mistake I made. So, and I did make one. We tend to always play with stuff in our hands. You can't reach that far. You'll be fine. And I'm just as bad about that. But when you have a hook in your hand and you have a rattlesnake on the table, and this is when I think you might have even been out there, and I'm playing with my hook spinner and I dropped it on the ground. So then I have to bend over and pick it up. You really shouldn't be spinning these things around and playing with them. You need to keep them where you can. If I really have to have something in my hand, I can set this down and play with the marker. Because if I drop that on the ground and that's the time that snake tries to run out, now we're fucked. I don't have anything to deal with it. So don't drop your tools. Don't play with your tools. As I say here, and play with my tool. But Caleb's got a backup tool if I drop this one.
Sure
That's
do.
okay. Anything else, Kurt? All right, Caleb, anything else?
Nope.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.